Fujimiya suggests that Yosuke become a pro baseball player to make money. She says that he could use his magic to pitch ultra-fast balls. However, Yosuke claims that in his youth, he was looked down upon by the baseball team in his class, but he still respected them as they earnestly practiced daily. Silfram, to cheat using magic, would be against his morals. Yosuke goes on to talk about how dangerous the terms in baseball sound, like dead ball and stealing bases. It reminds him of a time he was almost assassinated. He then shows the memory in question, where he tirelessly wanders through a forest after completing a dungeon. A person is shown close behind him and is revealed to be Mabel from the Ice Clan. She freezes Yosuke's legs in place and tackles him to the ground. Recognizing Mabel, Yosuke asks why she's there. Mabel sarcastically answers that she was relieved of her duties because he killed the dragon without using the ice sword. Not understanding that she was being sarcastic, Yosuke says he is happy for her. Although Yosuke was at her mercy, Mabel asks why he didn't defend himself. Yosuke says that he knows she has no intention of killing him. He then asks her if she's been eating properly, causing Mabel to whimper, cry, and pass out onto Yosuke's lap. He then drags Mabel to his room at an inn and places her on his bed. After Mabel wakes up, Yosuke gives her a loaf of bread and asks why she didn't become her government in our village. Mabel says that since she was no longer needed, her tree home was cut down for firewood, and that she was given an ultimatum of either becoming the village pet or leaving. So she ended up freezing all the villagers' feet, dripped icy cold water on their necks, and then fled. Shocked by Mabel's tenacity, Yosuke asks Mabel if she really doesn't like working, to which she mentions a few possible work interests of hers, but notes that they're all too labor-demanding. Yosuke relates to her predicament, but notes that he makes his living as an adventurer. He suggests that she could also make a living as an adventurer using the ice sword, despite her hesitance in doing so. Yosuke convinces Mabel, claiming she should live her life the way she chooses. Elated by the suggestion, Mabel claims she'd still need to break the seal on the sword, which is linked to her art, but believes that becoming an adventurer would fix her gloomy personality. However, Yosuke claims there's nothing wrong with being an introvert. The ice sword starts to crack, and Yosuke continues to compliment her, causing her to blush and the sword to crack even further. Yosuke then points out the ring he gave Mabel when she was asleep, saying that it is enough to provide for the rest of her life. Mabel misunderstands his intentions, and her sword completely melts. She tries to turn him down, but Yosuke insists she becomes flustered, and Yosuke suggests it's getting late and she should stay the night. Mabel asks to first have a bath, but Yosuke sniffs her and says that she doesn't smell bad. He mentions once she sells the ring, she will be able to afford the bath fee. Yosuke clarifies once she sells the ring, she will never have to worry about money again. Realizing the misunderstanding, her sword is immediately frozen once again, and she tries to attack Yosuke. The elf comes to see what the commotion is, only to find Mabel restrained and Yosuke holding her down. Seeing this, the elf releases Mabel from her bindings, and she then freezes Yosuke in place and bonds with the elf. The elf says how traumatized realizing it must be to wake up married to an orc, but Mabel seems to not mind. She goes on to reveal that the people of the Ice Clan share blood with those from another world. She explains the history of the Ice Clan's founding when a samurai from an alternate world was sent there 400 years ago. The samurai asked the god who reincarnated him to give him a sword capable of slaying a god. However, the elf interrupts because she already knows the story, having read it from a book. Mabel is devastated. The elf ruined her story and begins to cry. Telling the story was one of the few things Mabel knew how to do, and she breaks down after it was ruined. The elf apologizes and tries to console her. Yosuke is outraged that he never got a special bonus like a god-slaying sword. Takafumi suggests they look back to the moment when he first was transported to the other world. Yosuke rewinds through his memories and finds the moment he was resurrected. He runs into some men who beat him, thinking he is an orc. Fujimiya hears a voice interpreted as God, and Takafumi uses his translation app to translate what God was saying. It says that it would grant him an ability of his choice, and Yosuke at that time wanted to be able to understand and communicate with the people of that world, thinking that if he could communicate, they wouldn't treat him like a monster. However, he is instead captured and sold to a freak show as a rare talking orc. He was sold for 3 bronze coins, which turns out to be nothing, as some other trash they had sells for 120 bronze. This revelation shocks both Takafumi and Fujimiya about how dirt cheap he was. Watching this memory, Yosuke and Takafumi both get nosebleeds. It's then revealed that Yosuke had wiped his memory of this event, and Takafumi had his memory erased after reading about it in his uncle's diary. The memory continues, and Yosuke is locked away in a prison with other animals. They skip ahead about a week because the servant trader forgot about him. Takafumi and Fujimiya think he's gone mad talking to himself. But actually, Yosuke talked to the ray of moonlight that shone through a crack in the ceiling about the Sega game called Pulsemon. It turns out that the ray of light was actually Kill, the spirit of light. It teaches Yosuke and grants him his first spell, the Sword of Light. He uses the sword to escape the prison, and Fujimiya realizes that it was Yosuke's language translation ability that allowed him to communicate with the spirits. This revelation is also a surprise to Yosuke, who thought his magic ability had come from his ability to adapt thanks to playing video games. In the memory, he goes on to free the other captive monsters and then escape. One of the rabbits follows him, and Takafumi wonders if he kept it as a pet, but it turns out to be feral and attacks him. All the monsters turn feral and attack both him and the slave trader. Not wanting to live as an ordinary commoner, Yosuke fights back with his newly acquired light magic and saves the slavey trader and himself. Although the slavey trader is initially thankful, he becomes terrified by the bloody and crazed-looking Yosuke, who then uses his magic to transfer him to a safe location. Throughout the night, Yosuke continues to kill all monsters, and in the morning, he cooks them up and eats them. Yosuke notes how this was a good start to his journey in the other world, shocking both Fujimiya and Takafumi. It starts getting late, and Fujimiya decides she should get home for dinner. Yosuke agrees they should have a break, mentioning how things just got worse after that, revealing the time when he saved the elf from a dragon. Not wanting to miss the story, Fujimiya tells her family to have dinner without her. Yosuke shows his memory of saving the elf from a venom dragon. He is able to kill it with a single blow, and Fujimiya becomes saddened that she skipped dinner only to see this. Yosuke explains that he merely attacked the spot that the elf had already weakened. As the memory continues, Yosuke gives the elf his hoodie, but she pulls a knife out, thinking he is an orc. However, she comes to her senses and puts the knife away, but this leads to a misunderstanding, with Yosuke thinking she stabbed herself. He pulls up the hoodie to inspect her stomach. She calls him a pervert and berates him, marking the start of their troubled relationship. Takafumi and Fujimiya are left speechless, and Yosuke mentions how the elf was always troubling him after that, like when he was frozen. Speaking of which, Fujimiya asks what happened after he was frozen. Yosuke shows his memory as he lies in bed suffering from the aftermath of being frozen. It's revealed that both the elf and Mabel stayed in bed with him during the night. Yosuke and the elf have a moment together, but it's ruined by Mabel, who cries for her mother in her sleep. But it's just about not wanting to work, and the elf wakes her up with a karate chop. A flustered Mabel tries to explain her sleep talk concerning not wanting to work. Yosuke reminds her that she can sell the ring he gave her, but Mabel is hesitant to do it, saying that she is inexperienced with bartering. The elf enthusiastically offers to help her sell it, but Mabel decides to hold on to it. Yosuke suggests that the elf can take care of Mabel, and Mabel believes it would mean becoming the elf's pet. Afterward, they all eat breakfast together, and Mabel formally introduces herself to the elf and Yosuke. The elf doesn't share her name and simply refers to herself as Elf and reveals her mission to collect ancient relics. Yosuke introduces himself as Wolfgang Blood, shocking Takafumi and Fujimiya with his fake name. He tells them that he is from another country, trying to make his way back home. Takafumi asks his uncle why he gave them a fake name, and his uncle tells him he didn't want to give his name out to strangers. After that, the elf announces that she'd be heading back to Ikosa, the town where she sold her ring. Yosuke asks her why, but it's clear to Takafumi and Fujimiya that she wants to buy the ring back. Feeling threatened by Mabel, Mabel then asks what Yosuke will be doing, and he claims he'll try and check out a nearby dungeon that a hero was trying to clear. Mabel offers to help him. However, she needs to take a nap first, and Yosuke heads off on his own. Yosuke notes how late it's getting and calls it for the day. Fujimiya wishes she had gone home for dinner, so Yosuke treats her and Takafumi to some ramen. In another memory, we see the elf as she wakes up. She tries to grab her necklace with her feet. Yosuke suddenly walks in on her. He asks for his hoodie back, but she refuses, saying that it belongs to her now. Yosuke is determined to get it back, using his magic to restrain her. He starts taking it off, but struggles because the magic is getting in the way. The elf suggests he can undo the spell to make it easier on himself, and he foolishly agrees. But after he undoes the spell, the elf attacks him. Yosuke is completely knocked out, and the elf feels bad. She quickly patches him up and leaves him in the room. Yosuke mentions how messed up this was, and Takafumi can only agree, but he thinks that his uncle should have just let her have the hoodie. Yosuke says that the elf always took his stuff and never returned anything, and the only thing he ever got was her dress, which they end up getting Fujimiya to try on. Seeing her in the dress, Yosuke finds himself actually missing the elf. Afterward, Yosuke announces that the official name of his language translation skill would be Wild Talker, a name that Takafumi suggested. Fujimiya suddenly notices the time and has to leave, saying she has some college work to do. Takafumi watches his uncle play Golden Axe, and his uncle shows him how he can get the enemy to walk to their own death. He says that his gaming saved the day in the other world and brings up his memory of when he worked with some other adventurers. The adventurers are shown attacking him, and he skips ahead to after overpowering them and explains he is not a goblin. The group's healer, Alicia, recognizes Yosuke as the person everyone else mistook for an orc during the winter festival. Her companions are introduced as Riga and Edgar. Despite their hesitation, Alicia asks Yosuke to help them protect a village from a goblin invasion. He immediately agrees to help. A horde of goblins approaches, but Yosuke tells the others he has a plan. He taunts the goblins, and they rush at him and start beating him up. Kakafumi is not impressed, and Yosuke says his plan to lure them into a pit didn't work for some reason. He then goes to use the jump attack he learned from his game. He attempts to move against the goblins, but he misses every time. In the end, he destroys a mountain, which crushes all the goblins, and he thanks his game for giving him the moves to defeat the goblins. Takafumi points out that the moves from the game didn't help at all. Yosuke is on copium and insists they saved him. After that, the group heads back to the town for their reward. Yosuke finally seems to have made friends, but along the way, Alicia mentions how she saw him rebuild the barrier in the sealed city. Hearing this, Yosuke erases her memory, along with Edgar and Riga's memories. Despite this, Yosuke would go on to meet them again, and after fighting them once again, clearing up the misunderstanding that he's not an orc, they tell him that they are after a giant hedgehog that has been attacking a nearby village. Hearing this, he imagines Sonic and proclaims that they should try to communicate with the monster and try to find a peaceful solution. The hedgehog appears, and he becomes disappointed seeing that it looks nothing like Sonic. He talks with it using his ability. He tries to reason with it, but finds that it just enjoys killing humans for fun, and Yosuke completely incinerates it, leaving nothing but ash. Suddenly, a phone rings, and Takafumi sees that Fujimiya left her phone. Takafumi convinces his uncle to help him return the phone, and they fly to her location. When they get there, they see that she is with a shady-looking man. Yosuke lends his powers to Takafumi just in case, and he approaches her, returns her phone. The man becomes apprehensive, but Takafumi realizes he is actually Chiaki, Fujimi's younger brother, and he is overjoyed to see him after so many years. Yosuke joins them, and Fujimiya introduces him to her brother as a YouTuber, but Chiaki has no clue who he is. As Yosuke explains what he does on YouTube, Takafumi reveals to Fujimiya how he was prepared to protect her. Fujimiya asks what he would have done if Chiaki was a shady guy, and Takafumi reveals the powers he borrowed from his uncle. He turns them both invisible, leaving doubles of them behind, flying up to a higher location. Fujimiya is surprised he can use the magic so well. They head into an empty classroom, and Fujimiya says that this was just like in school when he stepped in when she was getting ganged up on. Takafumi can't quite remember, so he plays the memory in question, but it turns out that Fujimiya was actually the one that was picking on the group of kids, and Takafumi misread the situation and thought she was getting ganged up on. Despite this, Fujimiya was still flattered by Takafumi's good intentions. A girl suddenly walks in on them, shocked. She is Fujimi's friend, Tala, and Takafumi introduces himself to her. They get along well, and Fujimiya gets a bit jealous of them. They get back to Takafumi's home, and Yosuke continues on with his memory. He asks the trio if they have heard about the hero that's around. Alicia borrows Edgar's sword, reveals that she is the hero known as the Shining Crusader. She damages the sword and immediately bows down, apologizing to Edgar. Fujimiya is shocked to see that this is the legendary hero party. When Yosuke looks at Alicia's memory, he sees that they took credit for stopping the goblin invasion, although they have no memory of it. Alicia once again asks him if he was the one who repaired the barrier in the sealed city, causing him to be on alert, but she retracts it, claiming she understands his desire to keep a low profile and promises to keep his secret. Yosuke and the hero party travel together and reach the Labyrinth of Darkness in a ranked dungeon. Upon entering the dungeon, Yosuke immediately casts a spell that reveals a secret shortcut. At the end of the passage, they find the dungeon's treasure, the Wand of Salvation, but the party is completely underwhelmed with how easy they got it. Yosuke realizes what he did, and he wipes their memories. He drags them back outside, makes them go through the dungeon properly, and actually earn the wand. Takafumi is glad that things turned out well, but Yosuke wants to erase their memories again, make them forget that he helped them. But Alicia is overjoyed, saying this is a memory she will never forget, and Yosuke decides not to wipe their memories before leaving for the capital. Yosuke receives 3 healing charms from Alicia as thanks for his help conquering the dungeon. When the memory ends, Takafumi and Fujimi appraise Yosuke for handling the situation with a calm and cool head. But Yosuke says he learned to keep cool thanks to his video games. Takafumi wonders what happened after his uncle went to the capital, so his uncle continues the memory. We see him confronting a group of soldiers, and he uses his magic to read the commander's mind. He learns who was behind making Alicia a hero. He vanishes and heads toward the capital. We see a meeting between the commander and Chief Ricardo, the high priests. We learn that the hero party was meant to be a martyr, create a crisis, and boost their military funding. Yosuke appears, leading Ricardo's mind. The commander defends his actions, claiming that the hero party knew what they signed up for when they became adventurers. But because of his timid attitude, Yosuke couldn't argue against Ricardo's logic and gets surrounded by soldiers. In this predicament, Yosuke transforms into the greatest monster he could think of, turning into his middle school homeroom teacher. He tells Takafumi that his teacher was the best debater he ever knew, but in this form, he just ends up slapping Ricardo into submission. He slaps him repeatedly. When Ricardo's aide tries to defend him, he slaps her as well, and they both concede to him. Ricardo explains that the world has been unstable, with strange things occurring, the blaze dragon being slain, the sealed city barrier being broken, realizing he was the one behind these events. He couldn't bring himself to continue slapping them. There is a sudden blast of energy, and Mabel appears. Ulusuke returns to his original form, and her power instantly melts. An epic battle between the two occurs, but in reality, it's an illusion created by his magic, and they are really just watching from the sidelines. Yosuke asks what she is doing here, and Mabel reveals that she became a knight of the kingdom. She has grown an ego after getting a job. She tells him he should join her. She tells him to throw the fight so she can get a pay raise and make him her underling, but Yosuke can't accept losing to her. The soldiers see them for real after their illusion became too ridiculous. The commander suggests that Mabel is in cahoots with Yosuke. Mabel starts fighting him for real, even wounding some soldiers. Yosuke dodges her attacks. Yosuke unleashes his energy sword, and using his speed, he shatters her ice. Mabel comes to her senses, and it turns out she was being mind-controlled by the high priest. Yosuke condemns Ricardo for working with a man that uses such tactics. Ricardo worries about how they will be able to protect the kingdom, but Yosuke vows to protect them from any crisis that arises. He tries transforming into the blaze dragon to show his strength, and he flies away. Takafumi and Fujimiya are amazed at how cool he was, but he reminds them it was all thanks to his games. Sometime after that, Fujimiya is devastated. She loses her position as a knight of the kingdom. With the memory over, Takafumi has somehow grown scales all over his body. He thinks back to when he borrowed his uncle's power and says he used the spells with shortened incantations. His uncle tells him that the shortened incantations are like being rude and demanding to the spirits, so this is a punishment for that. Fujimiya panics seeing Takafumi transforming, but Yosuke tells her not to worry and ends up transforming himself as well, so Takafumi isn't alone. They both turn into dinosaurs, and Fujimiya is left stunned. There is a major heat wave across Japan, and Takafumi and Yosuke are feeling its effects. When Yosuke tries to play on his Sega Saturn, it fails to boot, and he starts having a meltdown. Fujimiya comes over and wonders why Yosuke doesn't just use some magic to cool the place down. Yosuke immediately casts his ice magic, blasting the room with an icy breeze, and they thank her for coming up with such a genius idea. Fujimiya wonders what the spirits actually look like, and Takafumi imagines a pair of beautiful fairies, but Yosuke explains that the spirits don't actually have physical forms, but are more like a collection of wills, and he is only able to hear their voices. Yosuke suddenly hears a spirit, and then says that they need to get a cow's head. Takafumi looks it up on his phone, but it would cost 5 million yen. Yosuke explains that the ice spirit he summoned to cool down the room is asking for the head as compensation for its work. It wants them to make an altar and offer the cow's head, or else it will freeze their fields for 10 years. However, it changes its mind and accepts a fish head as a compromise. An altar is set up, but Yosuke starts craving the fish head, blaming the craving on when they transformed into dinosaurs, and we see how they terrorize Fujimiya. Yosuke warns that it can be dangerous to be transformed for too long, as he pulls up his memory of when he was transformed as the Blaze Dragon. He became trapped in the dragon's thought pattern for a month and unable to transform back, but eventually, the elf found him after following a rumor about his location and fights him. They have an epic battle, but ultimately, the elf managed to overpower him and mentally connect with his mind and helps him revert back to his human form. Afterward, a noble accompanied by an army of soldiers who wanted to deal with the dragon arises. The elf recognizes him as the head of the Reincarnated family, to whom she owes money. It's also revealed that the elf is a princess, shocking both Takafumi and Fujimiya. The memory continues as Reincarnated demands Yosuke and provokes the elf, prompting her to draw her weapon, but is stopped because of a magical pact that they made. Reincarnated calls the elf foolish for using herself as collateral, but Yosuke wakes up and just destroys the magical restraint, believing he's repaid the debt to her. He tries to leave, but is held back by the elf. With the pact gone, a giant warrior steps up for Reincarnated, ready to teach the elf a lesson. But before they can fight, Yosuke gives Reincarnated a ring to help pay off the elf's debt. Seeing him give away another ring makes the elf rage, causing her to shake the ground as she powers up. The ground starts to crumble, and Yosuke grabs onto the elf as the ground below them falls, revealing a swamp. Reincarnated is distraught over the ring stuck on his finger and just orders his men to retreat. We learn that the reason the elf fell into debt was so she could buy back the ring he had given her. Seeing they are covered in mud, they head to a nearby hot spring to get cleaned up. Later that day, we see Fujimi's friend Sawa arrive at the apartment complex, and she is approached by Chiaki. She is creeped out by him, and when Takafumi comes down the stairs, his nonchalant attitude makes Sawa even more nervous. As they walk up the stairs, Chiaki talks about his collection, catching a cutie, and posting a video online, causing Sawa to continue to panic. When they get inside, Sawa warns Fujimiya that Chiaki and Takafumi are scumbags that think of women as collectibles. When she sees the fish head altar in the living room, she freaks out and tries to leave, thinking they are in a cult. However, before she can leave, Yosuke returns and makes things worse with his creepy smile. Despite this, Fujimiya explains that it's not a cult and Yosuke is just a YouTuber. Sawa finds it strange that Fujimiya is hanging out here, but quickly realizes that she has feelings for Takafumi, so she decides to test if Takafumi also has feelings, showing him pictures of the two of them to see his reaction. Takafumi becomes more fixated on the random men in the background. Sawa becomes interested to know what Fujimiya was like in elementary school, and Takafumi tells her she looked very similar to her brother Chiaki. Sawa wonders how Chiaki is doing, not recognizing that the shady guy was Chiaki all along. Yosuke decides to just show Sawa what Fujimiya was like back in elementary school, but is immediately stopped by Takafumi, realizing he revealed his magic. He immediately goes to erase their memories, but gets restrained by Takafumi while Fujimiya helps the other two escape. After this, Fujimiya scolds Yosuke for always resorting to erasing memories, and this reminds him of a similar situation with the elf at the hot spring. When they arrive at the hot spring, Yosuke is surprised to see the sign in Japanese. The elf notes that the hot spring's founder also came from another world, but has since passed away. The owner of the inn comes out, explaining that the inn was created using the power of God, but Yosuke just organizes his inventory, treating it as game dialogue that he can't skip, much to Takafumi and Fujimiya's dismay. They end up getting a room at the inn, and Yosuke is annoyed when he finds out he has to share a room with the elf. The owner's daughter offers to prepare him a room of his own, but the elf scares her away. The elf is excited to see their room, but Yosuke drags his futon away to another room. The elf is shocked at the tiny room and disappointed she'll be resting alone, but Yosuke suddenly returns and starts giving her a foot massage against her will, thanking her for helping him return from being a dragon. The elf can't handle the massage, but he drags her back and continues on. However, this gets interrupted when Alicia, Edgar, and Riga are revealed to be eavesdropping. Alicia apologizes to the elf, but ends up flattering her when she thinks that they are a couple, and the elf even shows off her ring. Yosuke asks them what they were doing here, and they tell him that they were training up in the mountains. Alicia thanks him once again for the Wand of Salvation, and the elf is shocked to see the legendary magic weapon. Riga tells Yosuke that they were training a new skill and is keen to see it, so he plays Alicia's memory and sees their new skills in action. However, this also reveals a fancy sheath being used as a laundry rack, and upon seeing it, the elf asks where the group found it and immediately heads off to look for it. Yosuke explains that the sheath was actually an ancient magic tool, and the elves have a goal to collect them. The group suddenly notices something burning, and they see that the inn is under attack by a hypno beast. It took control of the owner's daughter and had her open the door. Yosuke tries to use his magic, but there are two birds in the sky that are blocking his magic. He ends up struggling without his magic, but ends up using some magic charms to fight. He uses a wind charm to fly himself up, attacking with a fire charm, and slowing his fall with an ice charm. There is still one bird left, but it gets blasted out of the sky as we see the elf using her new weapon from the mountain. Seeing that he isn't looking at her, the elf shoots at him to get his attention, but it leads to another one of their misunderstandings. Fujimiya wonders how the bird sealed his magic, and it turns out to have terrible breath, which causes the spirits to be suppressed. When he tries to use his magic, it still doesn't work because the smell is still lingering. So he heads back to Alicia and the others, but finds her being chased by her friends who have also been hypnotized. He regroups with her and wonders if she can undo the hypnotization with her wand. He grabs it, thinking it might have a secret function like the elf's sword, and the wand flies up into the sky, bursting with light. Two barriers are created, and Alicia becomes flustered with Yosuke on top of her. After she calms down, she uses her magic, syncing her mind with the three of them, and is able to free them from the beast's control. The hypno beast suddenly attacks her, but she dodges and sends it flying using one of Rika's techniques. Yosuke reveals that the wand boosted her strength, and when she synced her mind to free the others, she gained their techniques. The beast gets back up and makes a run for it, summoning a bunch of monster hounds in the process. But Yosuke's magic finally returns as he restrains them all, summoning water serpents and defeating all the dogs. Water pours down thanks to his spell, and the rest of the fire is put out. Afterward, Yosuke puts up a barrier around the now exposed bathing area, which actually pleases the owner because they now can have a lovely mountain view. Everything turns out well, but Fujimiya wonders how this story was related to getting scolded for erasing memories. Yosuke says that after the battle, he had another bath in the hot spring, and he was joined by Alicia. As she gets closer, her skirt gets caught, and she ends up revealing herself, causing him to immediately erase his own memory. Yosuke acts cool, having forgotten what he just saw, and Alicia thinks he must have no interest in a little girl like her, but is then shocked to find out that she is actually slightly older than him. Alicia is devastated, but thinks her birthday could be wrong because she has no memories before she was 9. Using Yosuke's memory magic, we see that she was found after a goblin attack. She had no memories and was saved by the guards. She was adopted into the village where Riga and Edgar lived, and she treasures every memory that they've made. Hearing this, Yosuke feels guilty and admits that he has erased her memories twice. He reveals that he was the one who stopped the goblin invasion and the time they went through the back door of the dungeon. Alicia realizes that he should have the hero title, remembering how he fixed the barrier in the sealed city. But Yosuke tells her that he was the one that destroyed it in the first place. He explains that he is from another world and hopes that if he attacked the strongest barrier with his strongest attack, he might create a distortion in space-time to let him go back. Alicia forgives him, but tells him not to erase any more memories, saying she doesn't want to forget him. Yosuke concedes and ends up promising not to erase any memories about her. But Alicia suddenly remembers how he erased his memory after seeing her earlier. Yosuke demands to know what happened, not wanting to break his promise. Although embarrassed, Alicia prepares to recreate the site, but they suddenly get sniped at, and Yosuke is shocked. His barrier was broken. There are more shots fired, and Yosuke makes a run for it, while Alicia is left behind. 1 month later, Yosuke takes on a quest to slay a singing monster. It sings a song about the 3 shrines and trials of the land. Yosuke uses his magic and charges at the beast, but he ends up crashing when he realizes the monster was actually just Mabel. He wonders what she is doing out in the woods, worried she might get attacked by monsters. But Mabel shows off her cloak, which lets her disguise herself as a monster. He starts petting her, but she gets embarrassed. He wonders why she isn't in the capital working as a knight, since he doesn't know she got fired. Mabel pretends that she quit her job to be more free and explains that she lives in the forest and put up a scary ice sculpture to scare off anyone that approaches so she can live here forever. Realizing she is the singing monster, Yosuke prepares to fight her. Mabel is terrified and immediately agrees to leave. She takes down the ice statue, and she wonders what she is going to do. Yosuke reminds her that she'll be fine because she can just sell the ring he gave her, but she insists on keeping it. Yosuke suggests she could make money as a bard, but Mabel gets embarrassed and says she is used to singing alone. Yosuke thinks that since she is cute and can sing, she would have easily become rich as an idol in Japan. Mabel fantasizes about getting rich, but Yosuke thinks about how he can get back to his own world. Hoping to cheer him up, Mabel offers to sing a song from his homeland. Talk of whom, he wonders what song he chose, but it ends up just being the background music from the Sonic the Hedgehog game. He ends up passing out on Mabel's lap, and she keeps singing for him. But there are some knights that plan to ambush them. However, the elf appears, taking the man out, and she glares toward Yosuke on Mabel's lap. Yosuke thinks she is nice for saving them, but Takafumi and Fujimiya can clearly see she is furious. Takafumi asks his uncle about his love for video game music, and his uncle decides to put some on. But when he reads the manual, he finds out he has been mispronouncing the hero's name for the last decade, and he has a meltdown when Yosuke tries to record a YouTube video as the elf. He can't maintain the appearance and is still down about his mistake. Fujimiya thinks it's not a big deal getting the name wrong, but he argues that names are important, mentioning the time when the elf told him her real name. The two are shocked to hear this and insist on seeing the memory. The morning after he met Mabel, the elf confronts him about what he has been up to with Mabel and Alicia. She doesn't like that he keeps calling them by their names when she has known him longer, but he says that she never revealed her name to him. They get into an argument because she knows that he hasn't told her his real name either. So he suddenly reveals his actual name as Yosuke, making the elf flustered. He asks her for her name, but it turns out to be super long and impossible to remember. Yosuke decides to give her a nickname, calling her Sui. The elf thinks it's disrespectful, and her people would never allow it, but Yosuke wonders if she likes it personally, explaining that Sui means green, just like the color of her eyes, calling them beautiful like jewels. She becomes flustered, and when he calls her Sui, she tells him to only call her that in private. She promises to keep his name secret because she wants to be the only one that uses it. Mabel joins them, and she wonders what they were doing. Yosuke mentions that he is there to explore the ruins, and Mabel recognizes it as one of the 3 shrines of the land in Mabel's song. The trio realizes that it would apply to Yosuke. Yosuke approaches the shrine, and he suddenly blows it up. A godly being emerges, and Yosuke prepares to go all out against it, but Takafumi interrupts, and they wonder why he destroyed the shrine. He says that he was brought to the world by great power, so he thought that by defeating the power of the shrine, he would get closer to returning back home. Fujimiya thinks that there should have been 3 shrines, but it turns out he already destroyed the other 2 in his previous adventures. The memory continues as he uses his full power to blast the monster, but it instantly regenerates, and the elf notes that it's a mass of holy magic with no physical body, so regular attacks won't work. Monsters begin to rise from the ground. The elf attacks with her sword, and Mabel uses her ice against the monsters, but they keep on reviving. Yosuke decides to burn them to ash, but as he approaches, he is suddenly mind-controlled, and he unleashes his flames against the 2 girls. The elf jumps to save Mabel, but they end up being protected by the god-freezing sword. They wonder how they should fight you, but Riga suddenly appears and sends Yosuke flying. Rika thinks he took out an orc, and Alicia starts healing the other 2. They are there to find the singing monster, but the elf recognizes them, and Raga realizes it was Yosuke that he punched. The elf tells them they're up against a godly being and that Yosuke is being mind-controlled. Alicia uses the power of her wand to bring Yosuke back to his senses. She finds herself in Yosuke's memory, but gets rejected, describing his childhood as dark and lonely, with nothing but a box in front of him. They all feel sorry for him, but those were his happiest memories. Yosuke regains control, using his magic to slap himself, waking himself up. He throws up the flame of the blaze dragon, destroying the container, and the dragon begins to revive and absorb the holy monster's power. Since Yosuke couldn't fight something without a physical body, he planned for the dragon to absorb the monster, which he would then defeat. But Alicia wonders how he will defeat it now that that the dragon has gained the regeneration and mind control powers of the holy monster. Jose didn't think that far and realizes that he may have made a mistake. Yosuke suggests using Mabel's god-freezing sword, but Mabel is completely terrified, so it's not going to work. They think they are doomed, but the elf has a plan. She says that they just need to do more damage than it can heal, and mentions that her sword has the ability to absorb and amplify energy. If Yosuke provides his energy, they should have enough to defeat the dragon. Alicia worries about the mind controlling, but the elf reveals the jewel on her forehead protects her from any mental attacks. Alicia approaches Yosuke, and they talk about their last encounter at the hot spring. Yosuke wants to know about the memory that he erased, but Alicia is too embarrassed to tell him. The dragon starts to move, so the elf awkwardly asks Yosuke to carry her to help her fly. Yosuke is not too keen, so he ends up using his chain to carry her. With this, Mabel thinks she won't be needed for the fight, but as she tries to leave, the dragon appears to be targeting her because the Blaze Dragon has a natural grudge against the Ice Clan. Yosuke suggests that she can be the bait to distract the dragon, and she has no choice but to agree. As she charges at the dragon, it throws a boulder at her, but Alicia saves her, using one of Edgar's sword skills. As the others distract the dragon, Yosuke can tell that the elf is worried, but she remembers his words from the past about never giving up, so they prepare to face the dragon. Takafumi pauses the memory as he is in tears that he will finally get to witness a true fantasy battle, something he has been waiting to see since meeting his uncle. Yosuke makes some coffee, and Takafumi prepares some snacks, ready to finally see a battle. The memory continues as they approach the dragon. It blasts them with its breath, but Yosuke shields them from the attack. He transfers his magic to the elf, and she charges at the dragon. Mabel provides support using her ice to bind the dragon, and Yosuke unleashes his lightning to charge up the elf's sword. She creates an enormous blade of energy, slashing down onto the dragon and defeating it. The elf faints and starts to fall, but Yosuke rushes to her and catches her. She tries to confess her feelings to him, but he can't hear her. He carries her as they descend, but he smells a burnt smell on her and starts to sniff her, causing her to struggle, and they end up crashing down. Yosuke collects the flame of the Holy Blaze Dragon, and the elf warns him about keeping it. The others come rushing over, and Mabel asks to be praised for her efforts. Yosuke thanks them all for their help, saying he would have struggled without them. He especially praises Mabel, and it seems she wants to be carried just like how he carried the elf. Yosuke thinks they just want to fly, so he grabs Alicia and jumps up into the sky. She flails around, and when they land, Riga and Edgar also want to turn. The elf appears to be furious at Mabel, but Yosuke thanks her for singing to him, giving her another ring. The elf is about to lose it, but Alicia suddenly wonders why Mabel calls him Wolfkin Blood when she thinks his name is Kuroki. Yosuke explains that he just made them up, but tells them his real name is Yosuke. The elf is devastated. He gave out his real name so easily, and the other two find his fake names to be cooler, which makes him happy. The elf gets mad at Yosuke, causing him to drop the dragon's flame. She wonders what he plans on doing with it, and he reveals that when they slayed the dragon, there was a warp in the space-time. He plans to combine the flame with other entities in hopes that it will create a big enough portal for him to get home. But the elf suddenly tries to destroy it. She powers up her sword, and there is a struggle, but Fujimiya can tell that she just didn't want him to leave. She wonders if he ended up making the flame stronger to create the portal home, but Takafumi stops her, not wanting to ruin the story. They start getting hungry, so Yosuke decides to treat them to ramen again. They enjoy a delicious meal, and as they walk home, Takafumi thinks about how much his life has changed in just a year. But that's where this video ends. That's it for today. Further updates on the story will be pinned down in comment section. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also push the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you later.